Believe me, dear sir, there is not in the British Empire a man who more cordially loves a union with Great Britain than I do. But by the God that made me, I will cease to exist before I yield to a connection on such terms as the British Parliament propose. And in this, I think I speak the sentiments of America. Thomas Jefferson to John Randolph, November 29th, 1775. Thomas Jefferson is said to be the architect of our national independence. But what does that mean exactly? By the time of the American Revolution, the ever-changing situation between England and her North American colonies had become strained at best. The colonies had become solidly fixed in each of their respective spheres and footpaths, and the threat of annihilation from Indian invasions and from foreign aggression had receded to the point of an almost comfortable history, at least along the eastern seaboard of North America. The French and Indian War was over, and the colonies were now being taxed to pay for the English troops, who had saved the colonies from being defeated. Add to this the fact that the English were increasingly seeing the colonies as their own personal property, to say nothing of the colonists now becoming seen as a subspecies of the English people altogether, and the situation is becoming an impossible one. The taxation without representation idea is fully known to us, but what is not generally discussed is the concept of British mercantilism. There were 3 bones of contention between the colonies and England at this time, all of which were based upon British mercantilism. First was the fact that England wanted the colonies to import more from England than they exported to England, thus making England wealthy in the process. Second was the fact that the colonies were forbidden to trade with other countries without first clearing it with England, and then having those other countries pay England directly for the privilege. Third was the fact that the colonies were forbidden to make their own goods through manufacturing. Mercantilism was a way of life in Europe from the 1600s to the 1800s. The Trade and Navigation Acts were the chosen methods of implementing this idea fully upon the colonies, by limiting trade solely to the interests of the Crown. Although Thomas Jefferson is in fact credited with the writing of the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, the final draft was actually edited by a group of men, and altered accordingly before its final approval. How then could a man such as Thomas Jefferson, who was not even in North America when the United States Constitution was drafted and written, even be considered to be an architect of our original independence? It had more to do with what he did for us after the ratification of that august document. It was based upon the very example that he had set for us as the leader of our nation. In order to understand Jefferson, we have to understand the way in which he envisioned the federal government. To Jefferson, the federal government was what he referred to as the Foreign Office. He said that the true theory of our Constitution is surely the wisest and best, that the states are independent as to everything within themselves, and united as to everything respecting foreign nations. Let the general government be reduced to foreign concerns only. And let our affairs be disentangled from those of all other nations, except as to commerce, which the merchants will manage the better, the more they are left free to manage for themselves. And our general government may be reduced to a very simple organization, and a very unexpensive one. A few plain duties to be performed by a few servants. But I repeat that this simple and economical mode of government can never be secured if the New England states continue to support the contrary system. This was in a letter to one Gideon Granger on August the 13th, 1800, a man whom, in 1801, Jefferson would make his postmaster general for the entire length of Jefferson's two-term presidency. Gideon Granger was a staunch Jeffersonian supporter who wrote many pamphlets supporting the Jeffersonian principles of government. He wrote these in the North, however, and being in the North, in the very heart of the opposing Hamiltonian Federalists, Granger used a couple of pen names to publish these pamphlets, namely the pseudonyms Algernon Sidney and Epaminondas. Jefferson then continued in this same writing to Gideon Granger. Still, should the whole body of New England continue in opposition to these principles of government, either knowingly or through delusion, our government will be a very uneasy one. It can never be harmonious and solid, while so respectable a portion of its citizens support principles which go directly to a change of the federal Constitution, to sink the state governments, consolidate them into one, and to monarchize that. Here we see Thomas Jefferson upon the eve of his own election to the presidency, not 90 days hence, giving his full opinion upon the ideas of the northern states, or rather the eastern states, as he knew them at that time. It seems that these northerners wanted a change in the federal government that would allow for the federal government to be run exactly as they ran their own state governments, as a consolidated mass of a single government who was interested economically in every aspect of the people's lives. Today we know this as blue state liberalism, and absolutely nothing has changed in this form of a socialist philosophy among these same people to this very day. Thomas Jefferson was having none of it, however, none of whatever. Our country is too large to have all its affairs directed by a single government. Public servants at such a distance, and from under the eye of their constituents, must, from the circumstance of distance, be unable to administer and overlook all the details necessary for the good government of the citizens. And the same circumstance, by rendering detection impossible to their constituents, will invite the public agents to corruption, plunder, and waste. And I do verily believe that if the principle were to prevail of a common law being enforced in the U.S., which principle possesses the general government at once of all the powers of the state governments, and reduces us to a single consolidated government, it would become the most corrupt government on the earth.